Welcome back. News and Talk 1380 WAOK, the voice of the community. You're listening to People, Passion, and Politics, and we are on continuing this conversation that we were having about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, we've been talking about Ron DeSantis has now made this kind of his new thing in his campaign. He started off as the anti-woke candidate, and then he dropped by like 50 points in the polls. And now he's going to be the anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion candidate. Here to join us, you know her from the Georgia gang. You know her from Georgia politics. She's the wife of the former Republican Senate candidate here in Georgia, who I remind you, if he was the nominee, he would have won. But that's neither here nor there. We're joined by Miss Janelle King. Janelle, how are you doing?
Hey, Robert, I'm great. Happy to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this. Why is it that Republicans have suddenly decided that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the new mountain they want to die on? A couple years ago, it was CRT and critical race theory. A couple years before that, it was BLM and Black Lives Matter. Is it just acronyms they're mad at, or or do they just create these things to try to make them ambiguous so that they can drum up some support?
That's an interesting question. So, first of all, this is not a new issue for us. And it's not that we're anti diversity. It's not that we're anti inclusion. It's not that we're anti any of that. What we are anti is icing people out. What we're anti is interfering with the market. We're anti allowing some people to jump the line simply because they have more melanin or less melanin. So regardless of whether it's happening in the Black community, regardless if you're the person that's hiring, Black and brown people simply because they're Black and brown, or if you're the person who's hiring all white people and don't want to hire Black and brown, all of that is wrong. We've always been a party that's about focusing in on allowing the market to dictate things. Now, I will say that that is a foundational principle. I have seen, and I think I see it now, and I don't want to go too much in detail, but because I don't want to change the subject. However, I am looking at some decisions that are happening on my side of the aisle that I feel is anti-Republican foundationally. So when you talk about just being able to present an option to people where there's no one that feels like because I was born in a certain color of skin that somehow now impacts my ability to succeed or my ability to play the game like everyone else, that's when there's a problem. And we as Black Americans should know that more than anyone else.
But so, Condoleezza Rice said that racism is the birth defect of America. So how do you
Yeah.
fix a birth defect without putting in policies that would ameliorate its effects? As in to say that if for 200 plus years African Americans were discriminated against in this country, and then suddenly, let's say in 2023, we decide that they're not discriminated against anymore, well, doesn't something have to be done affirmatively to help bridge that gap of those 200 years? How else do you ever get to a point of equality or equity?
I would say that the way you deal with birth defects or any type of disability is through rehabilitation. And I think that we have gone through rehabilitation. Is there more to be done? Absolutely. However, I think we've gotten to a point where we're no longer debating policies that are somehow impacting you from being able to succeed. There are obviously policies that I disagree with. There are policies that I disagree on both sides of the aisle. However, I can't name a policy, and maybe you can, but I can't name a policy other than the diversity, equity, and inclusion that puts us in a position where we are creating a us versus them type of situation, where we're creating where we're manipulating the outcomes. So as of right now, do I think that that racism is dead? Absolutely not. And the reason why I say that is because it's a heart issue. I don't know what's in the heart of every person that I come in contact with. I don't know if every Black person likes me or dislikes me, and that's something that I have to consider being on this side of the aisle. However, that being said, it's a heart issue. You can't legislate the heart. I hats off to every organization that's working in the community in order to repair some of these relationships. However, it's not something you can do politically. So when you start creating policy that's now dividing, and look, in the words of our brother Cat Williams, division will divide every time. So when you start creating moments where you are creating moments of division, you can guarantee it's going to lead to more separation, and it's going to lead us backwards rather than forward. So for me, what I would like to push, and what I've been pushing, is that we have authentic conversations around this topic, understanding that it's a very sensitive topic, but keeping in mind that we are not where we were in the 60s. Hell, we're not even where we were in the 20s. And there was a time period, especially during Reconstruction, where Black people were doing so much better. I almost wish we had those same statistics today. So while there were challenges then, there was
hold on, hold on. Let me jump in right there because I think that's
yeah.
exactly my point. The reason we were doing well during Reconstruction was because of Reconstruction. You had federal troops that were stopping the Ku Klux Klan and stopping racist mobs from killing black people. You had the Freedmen's Bureau that was educating black youth. You had the 14th Amendment that was banning former Confederates from holding office. You had black people in state and local legislators. You had black U.S. senators. You know, every time a U.S. senator gets elected, a black senator gets elected, they say this is the first black senator since Reconstruction. Why? Because if you give us the opportunity to do so, and that's federally protected, then we can move towards equality. So why is it Republicans supported that in the 1860s, but they can't support that in the 2020s?
I don't know any Republican that doesn't support holding back the KKK or
You don't
mobs or
know any. You don't
racism
know
or.
any.
But
Any.
let me.
Wait, hold on. So after January 6th, where they're walking around Confederate flags in the Capitol, and now Nancy Mace and Stefanski are calling them hostages. You don't know any Republicans who are against that?
Well, here's the thing. I don't. Because there are people, and there are Black people that have family members that fought in the Confederacy as well. Not to say that they weren't in other situations. So I don't want to go off into a rabbit trail. However, I don't judge people. Like I said, I don't judge people based on what they hold in their hands or any of that. I judge them based on the contents of their heart and their character. Now, when it comes to January 6th, that's a whole other rabbit trail that I'm willing to go down at a different time, but so that I don't lose my train of thought. In reference to what you stated as it relates to going back to Reconstruction, that goes back to what I said about rehabilitation, right? We reconstructed, we realized that there was some additional challenges, we ran into Jim Crow and all that stuff, and now we're here, we're in a position where we're able to rehabilitate positively. All I'm saying is I'm not negating anyone's experience. I'm not saying by any means that there aren't people that are operating in a less than positive way. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that when it comes to policy, because a lot of things that you're talking about are connected to things that's not policy. When it comes to policy, we cannot push policy that's going to further division when we're already divided. You've got to figure out how to create policy that is fair for everyone, but also allowing opportunity and space for us to expand with respect to our different cultural differences and with respect to what we are carrying and we have carried considering the past. So I'm not negating the past, but what I'm saying is that, yeah, let's go back to those times when we were focusing in on making sure that there was opportunity for everyone. And the reason why we were able to do that was because of Republicans. The reason why the Civil Rights Bill passed was because of Republicans. So all I'm saying is that this is something that our party has owned and can continue to own, but we just have to do a better job at messaging it and making sure that we're not getting into the weeds and talking about stuff that is just going to continue to increase emotions, but instead we're just providing truthful information and facts based on our positions.
All right, we're going to hit a quick break, and when we come back, I want to kind of talk more about the today part of it. Because if you look at polling numbers, Biden's doing very poorly with black voters, doing very poorly with Latino voters, doing poorly with Arab American voters, doing poorly with young voters. But I don't see Republicans trying to capitalize on that. So I want to talk a bit about some of these policy initiatives that can be put in place that might help vote Republicans to bridge that gap. And then we can also talk a little bit about the presidential primary, since we have Iowa coming up next week, and whether or not this will actually impact any of that. So we'll be back after the break. Call in 404-726-1380, News and Talk 1380 WAOK.